The Shooting Range. In this episode, pages of history, boats and fortresses. Map guide, winning on the picturesque Poland map. And metal beasts, the Swedish modernized Centurion. Today in Metal Beasts, we'll talk about a Swedish tank of British descent, the Stridsvagn 104. Oh, not as long as last week's Swedish name, found in the game at BR 8.3. This Stridsvagn, or simply the STRV 104, is one of the late Swedish modifications of the Centurion tank. The engineers upgraded it with an engine taken from the M60, a set of reactive armor, and a new rangefinder. The main caliber here is a stabilized 105mm gun with elevation angles between -10 and +15 degrees. It also has two machine guns as well as smoke launchers and shells. Its blazer reactive armor provides an additional protection layer against HE rounds. The layout is classic. The driver sits in the front of the machine, while other crew members are in the turret. The engine compartment is found in the rear, while the ammo rack is situated in the center of the hull. The STRV 104 is a classic support machine on the battlefield. A little slow, but with a powerful, versatile gun. The L7 is rather familiar for those who have driven Western MBTs before and offers an impressive choice of ammo, especially the APF SDS that can pierce up to 330mm of armor from half a kilometer away. It's enough to handle any enemy tank at this BR, with its ballistics ensuring successful penetration at both close and long range. Another useful part of the available ammo is smoke shells. Use them to temporarily hide from the enemy and change your position. The powerful gun comes with a few penalties though. Low mobility won't give you a chance in catching light tanks, so don't hope to find a surprise position or rush a strategic point at the start of the battle. Your best tactic is to choose the central direction, moving in a group with your allies and pushing enemies out with the use of your powerful gun. Your armor is good enough to handle even some frontal shots. Of course, even such a deep modification of the Centurion can't handle an APF SDS, but deflecting a couple of APCBCs or taking on an HE round is possible thanks to the sophisticated gun mantlet protection and reactive armor. The most vulnerable area in the front of this tank is the lower front plate. It's thin, has a low sloping angle, and no reactive armor, so you'll need to hide this part of the tank whenever possible. Another useful tactic for this Swedish MBT is keeping a longer distance. This is how you make the most out of your excellent gun, comfortable elevation angles, and laser rangefinder. November 21st, 1942. Early morning. The H-6K flying boat took off from the water and started gaining altitude slowly. Its commander, Lieutenant Tsuneo Hitsuji, was looking at a map showing the waters to the south of Guadalcanal. His face was grave. A month earlier, the reconnaissance squadron had almost 20 flying boats, and now almost all of them were gone. 16 machines lost, and all of them inexplicably. First, a panicking radio message, and then silence. How could this happen? No known American fighter could go that far into the ocean. Maybe it was carrier-based? But there were no American carriers in the area. The command didn't want the American Navy to go around Guadalcanal from the south, so they were sending the H-6Ks for reconnaissance. Only for them never to return. Lieutenant Hitsuji didn't want to become the 17th dead hero of this war, so he made good preparations. The gunners' ports were armored, and the fuel tanks received a fire suppression system. All of a sudden, the tail gunner shouted that he spotted an enemy plane. The crew couldn't believe their eyes. They saw it, coming from the sun, diving right at them. A B-17! The grave mystery received an even graver answer. The Americans came to the genius idea of using the Flying Fortress as a heavy, no, even a super heavy fighter. It was famous for near invincibility, armed to the teeth, and thus was perfect for intercepting the slow flying boats. Hitsuji knew that running wasn't an option, so he decided to meet the B-17 head-on. The gunners launched a furious attack. Fortune favors the brave. One of the engines on the American bomber caught fire, preventing it from finishing the attack, and it had to turn east. But that wasn't the end of the battle. As soon as the first bomber disappeared behind the horizon, another B-17 started attacking the Japanese flying boat. This one was more cautious and tried to perform a flank attack to keep out of the tail gunner's aims. Lieutenant Hitsuji knew that he should never expose his boat's unprotected bottom, so he dived, barely leveling his machine near the water. The American kept close, attacking from both sides with his machine guns, sending endless waves of fire into the flying boat. But it refused to be destroyed, snapping back one response after another. Fuel was spurting out of its pierced tanks, and Hitsuji knew it wouldn't hold for long, even with the fire suppression system. Half of his crew was injured, and they were almost out of ammo. And once he made the dire decision to crash into the B-17 on the next attack, he saw something even more unbelievable. The furious American caught up to his plane and himself was going to ram the Japanese. This simply could not be. There were no samurai among the Americans. They couldn't do that, right? The pilot jerked the plane up, making it possible for the tail gunner to attack the fortress, and the tail gunner was quick to seize the opportunity. His well-aimed volley went through the enemy's fuselage so that the aircraft, spewing fumes, finally left them alone. The battle that lasted almost half an hour was over. Lieutenant Hitsuji later recalled that he never found out if that B-17 fell into the ocean or made it back to the base. He was happy that he hadn't seen it, however, because he wouldn't have been able to just leave without trying to save at least someone from that courageous crew. It was good that he didn't. Once his own plane landed in the waters near Shortland Island base, it sank. The hull had hundreds of holes made by bullets and lost all its buoyancy. And that would be the end of this story, but there actually was a happy ending. The B-17 managed to make it back to the base, and Lieutenant Hitsuji, having survived the war, started flying a Catalina and saved numerous lives in the open seas. But that was in peacetime. In this section of the shooting range, we'll be talking about one of the oldest tank maps in the game, the picturesque Poland map. Let's start with the left team this time. For them, the key part of the map is the southern shore of the lake with the C point on it. It doesn't need the full team, of course. 2 or 3 tanks are more than enough. Once you spawn, don't take the shortest route to it. You'd better take a little to the right, farther from the lake, to increase the distance from your enemy. Once you pass the dangerous area, head towards the mill next to the point. That's where you'll be likely to encounter your first major fight. Once you handle the enemies, it's time to capture the point. Bear in mind that this point offers great control opportunities. You can see both Point B and enemy approaches to the town. Now, let's check the other shore and see what can be done in the main part of the map. At the beginning of the battle, you can increase your advantage right away if you can get to the rocks before the town and try to destroy those enemy players that will take the straight path to point C. It's a long-distance shot, around 1,200 to 1,400 meters, but with some patience and skill at your side, you can hit enemy tanks and even destroy them. However, there's no point in camping here for too long. Once your aims are clear, head towards the town and try to capture point B. The most comfortable position for this is the area between the rocks and the house on the nearest brim of the capture area. Our next position here is the square yard next to the central point. The best part of this approach is its versatility. If you secure it at the beginning of the battle, you can catch those enemies who dash for the northern point. Stop at the center of the yard and peek through the tight slit between the houses that looks upon the northbound street next to point A. Sting like a bee when you see an enemy side. Alternatively, you can sit next to the square yard without actually going in and destroy enemy tanks in front of the church, preventing their team from getting to point A through the town's center. Finally, you can also help your allies hold point B using the very same yard. Moving on, go a little north and get to the position found in the yard near point A. This is where the action gets the thickest, so don't expect an easy stroll towards the capture area. Go slow, hide behind house corners, and destroy enemy vehicles one by one. Once the battle gets less active, capture the point and hold it off against new enemy waves. Now, let's talk about the right team's positions. Point C is just as important for them, but harder to get to. After you spawn, we recommend you go left towards the border of the map. That will increase the distance and also hide you behind the trees. Your next step here is to deal with enemy vehicles near the mill and get to the depression near point C. Wait before capturing it. First, take a good look around. There might be some enemies on the rocks near the town or in the small forest on your side of the lake. Once you've made sure everything is clear, get inside the area. After you capture it, it's time for you to head back to where you started, since that will give you an opportunity to control enemy approaches to the town while also hiding most of your tank except the turret. As always, be aware of your surroundings. There's always a chance of a surprise rear attack. Another useful position is found in the rocks near the lake. Your task here mirrors the other team's. Destroy enemy tanks moving towards point C. Your shooting distance, however, is a little shorter, around 1,100 to 1,300 meters. Don't camp here long either. Move to point B once your field of view is clear of enemies. There are 3 options for defending it. Number 1, hide behind the house corner in the northern part of the capture area. This will give you control over the opposite shore and the town's embankment. If your tank has good elevation angles, you can also stop inside the capture area closer to your base, and use the slope to prevent your opponents from getting close to the point. Finally, you can also drive along the water to the enemy side and sit under the rocks, controlling the town, the embankment, and the southern part of the lake. Our next position here is near the square yard. Our advice is the same as for the opposite team, with the only difference being your timing. You can get here a few seconds earlier and get ready to meet your enemies. After this point, try to occupy one of the exits to get control of the vertical streets, the embankment, and the church. The final position for today is found next to point A. There's a little trick here we want to tell you about. This yard has an arch that gives you a peek at both vertical streets. it's a good chance for you to catch a careless enemy and then get to the lower border of the capture area to help your team capture it. Well, now that our strategy is clear, it's time to answer some of your questions. The first question was sent by a player called Ravi. Sometimes when I try to zoom in while on a tank using right-click, the cannon automatically locks onto an air target instead of zooming in. Is there any solution for that? Hi there, Ravi. True, locking onto your enemy aircraft has recently become possible in mixed battles. If it feels uncomfortable, you can change it by going to Controls, Common, Basic, and checking Lock Target there. Crispy Bacon asks, in arcade battles, is there a point in using bushes to hide certain areas on your vehicle? Hello, Crispy. Yes, that's useful even in arcade battles. Despite the fact that you have a penetration indicator, additional visual cover may hinder your enemy's aiming process and give you a potentially life-saving split second. Another question comes from Shelby67 Clone 67. Which game mode do you use for your gameplay? Hi there. For capturing videos, we usually go into realistic battles. It shows the most realistic behavior of the vehicles while not creating additional difficulties like the simulator mode does. TL1 Lion writes, why do most of the reserve of low-tier vehicles have a stabilizer? Hi there. Most reserve tanks in the game have low-caliber guns. They have a low mass, which enable the designers to install a special shoulder stop that helps stabilize the gun. It's basically useless on high speeds, of course, but it helps you aim your weapon quicker when you slam on the brakes. And the last comment for today was written by Provaz94. What's the slowest possible reload rate in the game? Hi, Provaz. The reward for the slowest reload in War Thunder goes to the Soviet KV-2 heavy tank. A beginner crew can only manage this task in 43.3 seconds. And if you have just 2 crew members left, it takes twice as long. If you find your tank missing 2 crew members and need to reload, you can find some cover and go and make yourself a cup of tea. Well, in spite of everything you've heard, that's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. Don't forget to leave a like. We implore you. Learn your maps, share your thoughts and comments, and see you next week. That's all. Dismissed.